Welcome everybody back to my lecture about understanding the bigger energy picture according to this book here. Today we'll talk about still introductory parts, and I will talk not directly about energy but some reasons why we have our global energy problem. What I want to talk about today is limits on growth and overpopulation. If you read a report about environmental and energy problems, normally overpopulation is not mentioned as one of the big reasons for it. But still, I think we have to talk about it. If you look about the development of population on our planet, you all know that since thousands of years the human race has been developing a lot of cultural skills and technological capabilities, and all that supported our struggle for survival, and finally it led to a dominance of our species on this planet. At the final end, even as we are today now, we are not only dominating our own environment, but the changes on the whole globe depend on our activities as a human being. So if you look back the last 10,000 years, for example, on this graph here, you see it all started with a very small population of human beings, and then only in the last 100 years basically there was a steep rise. It's an almost exponential curve. Get a better feeling for it, I put some labels on here. It started with us hunting mammoths at the last ice age, for example, and the time before. Then at some point you see that population got a small step, a rise of it. That was basically the time at which the big religions of our culture arrived in our world. I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if there's a reason that one caused the other or vice versa. In any case, that was a time where all big world religions appeared. Then population rose slightly higher and higher, and then at some point you see this almost exponential rise, and that was at the time when there was the Industrial Revolution. People started to use energy from fossil fuels. That was a time as there were so many people around that you had enough labor. It's where the capitalism as an economical system appeared, and at the same time communism was developed, and these two counterparts seem to have a very efficient influence on our economy and on our growth. And of course there are many more aspects. One of them, of course, is that at some point the population was so high that it was hard to feed all of them. Then the Green Revolution and chemics and agriculture in an industrial style were the reasons why population could grow even further. And today we are up here. This is a few years old. Today it's even higher, and a lot of people believe that soon we will have a population of 10 billion people on this planet. So everybody who knows about those rise time curves, this exponential growth, knows that it cannot go on like that forever. Instead, of course, we either have to stop the curve, we have to stop the growth, or there will be a breakdown of the system. In any case, it cannot continue this way. So let's first talk about the options of birth control. Somehow birth control is still something which many people avoid to talk about. There have been efficient measures in China, but a lot of people don't like it the way it was done there. So let's have a look how the world looked a few years ago. This is from 1970 now. So what do we see on this picture here? We see the map of our planet, and we see the fertility rates in the year 1970. The different colors are different fertilities. Let's first talk about what fertility is. Fertility rate is the number of children a woman in the population gets on average. From first principles, one would say a fertility rate of 2 means there's a stable population, because then every woman gets 2 children, and when she and her husband dies, there are again the same number of people on the planet as before, if you do that in the average. So it also means that if you have a fertility rate which is much larger than 2, every woman has more than 2 children, and these have again more than 2 children each of these women. So in this sense, population grows exponentially. If the rate is smaller than 1, the population dies out also exponentially and goes against 0. So if you think about it in more detail, you find out that you need more than 2 children to have your population stable, and the number is about 2.1 which you need. So let's have a look at the map. So you see areas in Africa, for example, where the women have 4 children, 5, 6 or more. And in Europe, for example, the numbers are close to 1 or 2 children, so there we have already a stable or even downwards going population, whereas in other countries population is still rising a lot. I remember still when I was a child, we had a neighbor who had, I think it was 14 children. In the old days it was the same in Europe and in other countries. Nowadays these large fertilities are only left over in some somewhat less developed countries. So poorest countries usually have large growth rates. That's what you can keep in mind. Why is that? Well, it's called the demographic economic paradox. Why is it a paradox? Well, normally you would say if somebody is rich, he can buy enough food to have a lot of children. So you can easily have 10 or 20 children if you have a good job and you have servants and so on. But if you are poor, it's hard to get enough food for all your children, therefore you should have few children only. But reality is just the opposite way around. In the poor countries, people get a lot of children. One reason, of course, is that parents want to be served by their children and grandchildren when they are older, so they need some. The other reason is, of course, the high mortality of children in these countries and so on. So if you want to have kind of birth control, the first step towards birth control is that you have to reduce poverty in a country so that people don't have to have many children to survive as older people, and for some reason then people also don't have so many children anymore. And to have an end of poverty, this of course means you have to have enough water, food and energy, those 3 things which this lecture is about. That is why I mention birth control at all in this lecture here. If you now look at the same map for 2014, you will find out that the world has changed a lot. So in most of the countries the fertility went down, women get less children. The main area where there are still a lot of children born is Africa, as you might know, but also some other countries. But there are, of course, also other reasons which control the amount of population you have. If you look, for example, here in East Asia, in the area, you see there's a green country, the Philippines, and another one which is Papua New Guinea. And then there's Indonesia, which is blue in this map. Why is it this way? Well, it means that in Indonesia the birth rate is significantly smaller than in the Philippines or in Papua New Guinea. And this is not something which of course partially has to do with industrialization, which is higher in Indonesia, But there are also other reasons for it, and one of them is religion. Religion also has a big influence on the amount of children of a family. So in this respect, there are points which go beyond your wealth and your industrialization, which also control the amount of people you have. Why is it so important? Well, to repeat that, only if you can in future limit the population, we are at all able to feed all of these people and to have enough resources to continue living. If we don't limit our population, at some point there are too many people on the world and we will die in large numbers. And I will say a few of these reasons in a minute. But before I come to the next point, I want to mention one more important point, maybe the most important ones, about birth control. You have to have women which are liberated, because women are the key to controlling birth. A man and a woman have completely different attitude to children, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but apparently. The women know that they have to feed the children afterwards, and therefore women tend not to get too many children if they have control about that. Now I want to tell you what happens if we don't limit our population. Well, there are many things which we will have in climate change, and we also had that in the past in many areas before. The first one is there's not enough water, there's a drought and not enough things grow, so then people will start dying in this area if they don't get enough food. We all know pictures from Africa where we see that there are people starving from not enough food, but we also had that in Europe, we had it in the US in the last wars, where people were starving because there was not enough food around. And when climate change is coming into effect, those things can suddenly appear very quickly. For example, last year in Germany, we had a big drought and a lot of our wheat did not have the outcome which we originally planned to have. As long as it's only one country where you have not enough food, you can buy it from other countries. But as soon as a drought or a problem in climate appears in many countries, then it will be very difficult to feed the world. The next point, which comes when there are too many people and when there are not enough resources and not enough to eat, is war. We have hundreds of examples for that in our history. And another point which has to do with overpopulation to some extent are epidemics. When I was young, I learned about epidemics only from history books. Today, finally, after the corona pandemic, we know those things can get real very fast and they can have a big influence on our living. In the former times, those things like droughts and hunger and wars, they happened mostly only in small geographical areas. So when the Incas, for example, had war against each other because of overpopulation, somebody in Europe or in China did not even know about it, and he was not at all affected. If there's climate change, things are different. The climate change affects the whole globe at the same time in a bigger or smaller effect maybe, but it can affect the whole globe and will affect it. And then we get to quite different problems. Those things also happened in the past. There have been several, some scientists talk about 5 major biological mass extinctions in the past. You all know the dinosaurs don't exist anymore. They all died because of a change of the environment. So if you look at the plot here, what is plotted is the amount of marine species of certain kinds which were extinct in certain years. The scale is now from minus 540 million years ago up to today. And you see there are lots of these spikes in it, and each of the spikes, it goes up to 30, 40, 50%, tells you what fraction of marine species was extinct in those years. So you see, there have been several of these spikes where a big part of the life in the marine life was extinct, and only other species then continued to live. So the second plot here shows you the vertebrate population from 1960 down to today almost. And what do you see? Since 1970, the number was set to 100%. The vertebrate population goes down to today about 40% in the year 1915 or 16, this is. And today it even went further down. So that means that today we are again in a biological mass extinction. This plot just shows you the vertebrates, but of course there are a lot of other species which are going down very fast, which are not on the plot. So here we have an extinction, and this time the extinction is not due to a volcano or an asteroid or something very strange from outside, but it's due to human beings. That is why this geological age which we are in today, we also call the Anthropocene. Anthropo means from human being, so it's a time where the geological development on a big scale on our planet is defined by the activities of human beings. This is the first time the case, and at the moment it doesn't look too good for our planet because of that, but I will come back to this point when I talk about climate change. Okay, so this shows you what happens at the moment with the biological life on our planet. But of course the human population also has to be limited because of many other factors. The first one which comes to our mind, of course, is industry, all the investments we are doing, all the material we are using. This is not enough for the big population we are having at the moment. And some people say at the moment we are using resources which are about a factor of 3 higher than what the planet can deliver to us on a long-term scale. This is certainly true that there is a fixed limitation, and we are already beyond this limitation. The reason for this large growing has to do, of course, with our capitalistic system, also with financial capitalism, and at some point in our lecture we also have to talk about the distribution of wealth, which is very unequal, also the distribution of resources which are consumed by people is very different depending on your own wealth. So I come now to the end of this lecture. As I said, there are limits on growth on our planet in many aspects. We have to reduce population on the long term. We have to reduce the consumption of resources and goods. And of course, the most essential parts are carbon, energy and water as our living conditions. And that is what I want to talk next time. So next time we go to the next chapter, which is about the nexus of energy, carbon and water. And we will talk about in the first part about energy. So that is where we really go into the center of that, what this book is about. Thank you, and I hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.